All right, hi. Partnership with a success recommendation for the facilitate generate greater calibration between registered apprenticeship and public workforce system May 2011. Registered apprenticeship earn, learn, succeed. White paper commissioned by the Advisory Committee for the Apprenticeship to Education Workforce Partnership Work Agreement Office of the Apprenticeship Department of Labor and Employment Training Administration. Introduction. Recently, with the U.S. Department of Labor and Employment Training Administration Office of the Apprenticeship has engaged in the aggressive effort for the registered apprenticeship and strong with the flexibility, talent, development strategies. One of the primary goals of this effort to encourage the workforce investment system leverage working in the registered apprenticeship that well considerable profit has been made in partnership with work advisory committee with the apprenticeship. They recently noted that the barriers that still exist for frustrated efforts calibrate and align resources. Specifically, work group that discussed the challenge with the phase of the registered apprenticeship programs becoming improved with the provided with the on-status eligible training provided with a lift and obtaining the financial support with the pre-apprenticeship training with the related instruction utilization individual training accounts funded by the workforce system under the Workforce Improvement Act and Workforce Investment Act. Sorry, a white paper written of the request um, the advisory committee for the apprenticeship and partnership of the work group explored with the registered agency sponsoring of the eligible training provider list and the ITAs or the individual training accounts. Other issues accounting many recommendations improvement. Executive order. Registered apprenticeship is important. The component of the suit with the potential education training served with the workforce system with the provide with the customer should be used with the most often strategy to train and employ with the job seeker with the modern pair with the they paid on the job learning with the radio related technical and theoretical training with the carrier field with the ideally suited to many with the unemployed dislocated workers served with the workforce system. The registered apprenticeship offers the job seekers immediate employment opportunity with usually high pay or pay higher wages. Offer the career growth with a highly sought for the afterlife with the skill set, portable credentials that are nationally and often globally recognized. The opportunity to apply with the apprenticeship training or 2 4-year college programs. Registered agency provide for the employee to access the pipeline with the highly skilled with the work of the trade, and to meet the currently industrial specifications of each of the workforce safety and increase with the productivity. The apprenticeship across with the wide range industry is as change include with the construction, retail, with the healthcare, telecommunication, information system. The detailed employment trading agency offers the encourage the public workforce system partner with the lever the registered apprenticeship component, including the 2007 publication of the employment trading agency, the training and employment guidance letter, number 20207. The apprenticeship remain far from the fully aligned with the public workforce system main state with leadership authority, particularly with those states with the attempt with the Office of Apprenticeship sponsored regional action, the clinical collaborate the successful the partnership registered apprenticeship under the value of the registered apprenticeship in their workforce strategy they have made significant towards the alignment, however, the distinct seems to be most evident at local level, in particular where local workforce investment boards, one-stop career center with staff unfamiliar with the registered apprenticeship do not know how to make the fit with the program's traditional administrative line apprenticeship model with the Workforce Investment Act. The eligible training provider list. And the individual training assessment frameworks appear to be posed with a significant challenge at the local level. The provider provides one overview of the key barriers inhibiting the partnership, particularly with the related and eligible training provider list, exceptional individual training assessment funding issues. Example: the provision on promising practice of 3 states that demonstrate on how the registered agency and the Workforce Investment Act, other state funding of the 3 is example: the Workforce Investment Act programs that can report with the performance of the registered agency under the common measure performance measure for the created with the employment training engaged attainment with the Workforce Investment Act goals in the workforce recommendation for the continually efforts to support with the enhanced partnership of the registered agency through the public workforce system. A. Eligible training provider list, individual training account, summary of the challenging issue with the registered apprenticeship sponsors, the registered apprenticeship local regional staff of the state local workforce staff systems provided surveyed with a paper report of the following common changes with related with the aligned with the registered agency and eligible training provider list and individual training accounts former with the Workforce Investment Act. The changes and challenges discussed with further detail in section 4. Process being added with the training provided with to the eligible training provider list is complex, cumbersome, and varies among the Workforce Investment Board within same state from state to state. These lack of understanding between the registered apprenticeship and the workforce system regarding the other programs. Some of the workforce investment boards are not interested in working with the registered apprenticeship due to lack of understanding relating the funding of the lack of local service priorities. Other reasons registered apprenticeship may not always be interested in eligible training provider lists or individual training accounts. Processing can become cumbersome and perceived and not worth of effort and paperwork required. B. But best practice in the three states, Alaska, South Carolina, and Kansas. Despite the challenge, some of the area of the country with successfully managed to have the registered apprenticeship program to the eligible trainer provider list and funded with the individual training, technical training accounts for the apprenticeship without their utilized more of the flexibly funded with the source of the Workforce Investment Act Reserve Fund, State General Funds for the support of the registered agency. Section 5 provides a detailed example of the effect of the creative approaches taken forth for the case instead of the registered apprenticeship agency in Alaska, South Carolina, and southern central Kansas. C. Measurement and performance. One channel of leveraging the Workforce Investment Act, the workforce and the system funding of the support for the registered apprenticeship of the agency lack analysis regarding how credible the performance can be captured in registered agency programs information system counted toward the Workforce Investment Act program goals. Detailed example of how the performance can be created with the Workforce Investment Act common measures are provided in Section 4. D. Recommendations. Effort to incorporate the registered apprenticeship throughout the workforce investment system have not yet been fully produced for the intent of the use of the result of the use of the model with an integral part of the workforce development strategy, which channel of the barrier of the collaboration exists. While registered agencies not mandated in the Workforce Investment Partner Program, progress has been made as noted above. Several of the state local areas have been created with ways to work with the existing system with the support of the registered apprenticeship as important talent developed in the strategy. Full recommendation for replicating and expanding this model of the partnership in alignment with the discussed in detail section 7 of the page 16. 3. Value of the registered apprenticeship of the workforce investment system. The registered apprenticeship is important additional pursuit of the potential education training as this over the workforce system provided with the customer should be used often the strategy for the trained employee the job seeker of the registered agency. Apprenticeship is highly versatile with aligned with the advanced goal of the keys workforce investment system and initiative of the business industry driven model with the agency. Registered apprenticeship programs have also high wage, high growth industries, especially with the high face of shortage of the skilled worker. The registered apprenticeship will provide with the platform for the employer to develop and apply with the industry standards for training programs that are not only improve the quality of the workforce, but also over the model with increase the productivity. Service employees have access to pipeline high skilled labor workers trained to meet the exceeded certification license requirement. Apprenticeship crosses or wide range industry that include the construction, manufacturing, healthcare, telecommunication, information technology, and many others. As such, it can serve the important talent development, the strategy and economic development strategy for the state and local workforce investment boards and one local stop career centers. The registered apprenticeship model pair of the paid on the job learning with the related technical theoretical training with the career field. The earning while learning on the job model is ideally suited for the main dislocated with the employed worker with serve with the public workforce system. The job seeker that have immediately employment opportunity usually pay higher, which offer the career with growth and highly suitable afterlife skill sets, portable credentials that are naturally often globally recognized for the opportunity to apply with apprenticeship training 2 to 4 year college programs. Feature of the registered apprenticeships include the customized format, extensive industrial knowledge of the state and federal apprenticeship staff, significant employment with retention while age outcomes make the program an effective means for the winning of the workforce system goals by coordinating and collaborating with the knowledge professional that make up the registered apprenticeship system. The workforce system can increase the quality of the service in both employer workers, customers, and enhance activities and support concurrent workforce system cooperative with the further performance goals metrics on with the registered apprenticeship aligned with those of the workforce system. The Workforce Investment Act programs and the apprenticeship performance can be calibrated under the system. The Workforce Investment Act common measures are used to gauge effectiveness work system strategy in these type of source of the scarce resource of the public workforce development registered apprenticeship system program should work and another one better for the more comprehensive services employer to job seeker. Despite the efforts of Employment Training Administration in the 17th and since 2007, the Training and Employment Guidelines Letter number 0207 was issued in the current of the public of the workforce system with the part and leverage of the registered apprenticeship system far fully integrated with the main state with the leadership particular in those states attended with the Office of Apprenticeship, the sponsor for the Regional Action Clinic of the Collaborative Success, the partnering of the registered apprenticeship, and understanding the value of the registered apprenticeship in the workforce strategy have been made significant gains toward alignment with the disconnect that seems to most of the evident local level, in particular with the Workforce Investment Board, one-stop career centers and staff that are uniformly unfamiliar with registered apprenticeship do not know how to fit the programs that traditionally operate, becoming approved for the eligible training provider list for the other obtain individual training account funding with the apprenticeship program program participation appeared the most significant barrier of the registered apprenticeship program. The following section discussed the challenge issue surrounding the alignment of the registered apprenticeship model with the eligible training provider list, individual training accounts under the workforce investment. For eligible training provider list individual training accounts, challenges and issues. One of the greatest challenges of the registered agent sponsored working with the workforce system has been exceeded with the eligible training provider list individual training accounts. For the apprenticeship sponsor has attempted to qualify the training barrier provided with the eligible training provider list and have defined with the variation of the state to state from local to workforce investment board to local workforce investment board within a given state, with as well as the Workforce Investment Act system that's operated with what needs to be accomplished in order to provide place on the eligible training provider list. And more, but the both Workforce Investment Board representative of the registered apprenticeship sponsors survey often expressed the opinion that the eligible training provider list are ideally suited for the registered apprenticeship because of the gear to the tuition-based classroom training. The application of the process of the registered apprenticeship as a sponsor to get with the eligible training provider list is perceived as may, with the time-consuming cumbersome with local boards, may require additional information local provider to maintain subsequent eligibility paperwork, recording, record keeping, and required for the on the deterrent with the registered agency program. Registered apprenticeship is one of the more mandated workforce investment partners may support with the local workforce investment board simply not interested. They may have to do with the misunderstanding of the registered apprenticeship at the base of the past biases. The notation of the registered apprenticeship is just for the building trade, with the union the registered or that the registered agency has its own funding, etc. At the same time, the registered apprenticeship is not interested in part of the individual training account with the funding through the one-stop career center with the cover the field is not worth the expense effort. This acts especially true with the small apprenticeship program and such in those instances with the registered apprenticeship that have the successfully gaining the eligible training provider list, taking advantage of the individual training account funding with typically even the small account supportive of the service of a small portion of the related instruction. Local board set policy regarding the max cap of the individual training account funding with amounts that can vary with widely with across the state eligibility ongoing issues. Once the apprenticeship start earning the money with the continually eligibility limited for the Workforce Investment Act, dollars are spent on training. The participation must determine the financial eligibility. Other available sources for the funding, such as the Pell Grants, must be exhausted. Furthermore, the workforce investment funds cannot be supplying to other training funds. Many require registered apprenticeship program staff that attributed some of the difficulty and misconceptions due to the lack of connection between the registered apprenticeship program, the workforce development system, and the safe the responsibility lives of both registered apprenticeship and the workforce system. And when the training where strong relationships exist between the two systems, they have successful calibration, individual training account funding through the registered apprenticeship. The underscore the need for the cross education with the level of staffing. Registered apprenticeships that also staff with reports turnover the rates of the one-stop and staff has implicated with the partnership with the return efforts of apprenticeship activity, registered apprenticeship and workforce investment act. This takes time to educate the staff of the registered apprenticeship can be supported with the workforce investment fund, and oftentimes staff of the developing understand what the value of the registered apprenticeship workforce solution. The work of the one-stop has been reassigned with a particular true during the recent recession. On the other hand, the small number of the registered apprenticeship staff makes it difficult for the registered apprenticeship to develop a sustained relationship with the workforce investment on one stop to do this side of the many of the states with a large number of local workforce investment operating the anonymous with the registered apprenticeship staff cannot meet all of the workforce investment boards regular basis, so they cannot market the value of the registered apprenticeship in the working system, maintain the communication necessary to lead the greater calibration. Although the focus of the problem, the registered apprenticeship with experience with the getting and the success of the eligible training provider list and the individual training accounts, the training employment guideline letter number 207 identified the number of the other ways the workforce investment funding can be leveraged in support with the registered agency, including the customized training on the job and training workforce investment, state reserve funds, and workforce investment incentive funds with the Workforce Investment Act. State reserve and incentive funds must be most flexible. In addition, with the non-state workforce investment, state fund sources can be tapped to support training agencies. The following section highlights the most replicatable example. The three states have been found ways to effectively work within the requirements of workforce investment to support the registered apprenticeship, as well as how to use the workforce investment reserve funds and other state funding to support the registered apprenticeship. Alright, some of the areas country that have successfully made with the registered apprenticeship program for the eligible training provider list. Subsequent with the funding with the individual training account for the apprenticeship must otherwise form a flexible source of funding with workforce investment, state fund, reserve fund, and state general funds to support the registered apprenticeship. The three states that are highlighted, Alaska, South Carolina, and Kansas, are often cited with that they are effective with the practice with the number of the workforce area of the section organized for the first and state, and then it was strategy with a description of how states might put their strategies into practice. Alaska. Utilization eligible training provider list, individual training accounts. Alaska's position on the eligible training provider list does not lend itself to the registered apprenticeship program that's because of the eligible training provider list is geared to support the cost of tuition based classroom programs, classroom training. The registered apprenticeship is not structured for the classroom based fee-based training, therefore it is not much success in getting an eligible training provider list. The state has decided to write the eligible training provider list procedure to make the friendlier to the registered apprenticeship. This is anticipated to make place in 2011. Despite Alaska served the registered apprenticeship with the limited scale with the individual training fund for all of the individual state systems served the apprenticeship approximately 21% of youth workforce investment funds and approximately 77% of the were provided with individual training account funds. Alaska has founded the individual training account with workforce with the non-union with the open shop with the mom and pop the shop to register with the registered apprenticeship. The individual training account fund can be used with the related instruction of the Workforce Investment Act for the eligible participant. Community college provided with the already with the eligible training provider list for participant and training with the registered Worker Investment Act. Training participation when classified ended with the Workforce Investment Act program takes place from the credit for the individual where it's already working at the point of the filing of the retention and the tracking back begins. For non-union programs, the Workforce Investment Act funds that has been used for the pay online with the webinar based course of the state preferred not to use correspondence course because they are self-paced and provide little cover and control over how the student progresses and making it difficult to follow up on how people are doing work. Online training and webinars require participation to be certain place at this any time allowed them for mentoring, etc. Some of the mom and pops are not skilled trainer mentors, so always offer the option typical for the open joint programs between the benefiting of the individual training accounts and funding with the union pay cost related instruction Workforce Investment Act funds are used to be supportive services such tools. One of the issues Alaska hopes to address in revising the eligible training provider list procedure funding with the interim steps do not lead to the employment, therefore do not currently qualify for the eligible training provider list. For example, anyone interested in becoming a commercial bush pilot with Alaska cannot take an advantage of the Workforce Investment Act funds to get the private pilot license instrument training rating because the alone does not lead to the employment. Therefore, several distinct courses that may be taken adjustment need to be made to allow the funding. For example, these courses could also be packaged so that they are components with one of the training courses. Are supported for the registered apprenticeship program infrastructure. Due to Alaska's size issue related with the travel of limited staff, the staff of the development made to allow the local one-stop center to assist with the process of making an application for the apprenticeship sponsor. State of the apprenticeship that has only 2 staff to cover the entire state with the creative with the problem to solve the train with one-stop center with the staff. Prepare the paperwork, do the analysis of the curriculum, prepare the packet with the transmittal with one of the two. The requested registered apprenticeship with the staff with the review once approved with the state registered apprenticeship staff sign off the program and the paperwork is turned over and returned to the sponsor in order for the apprenticeship of the program to begin. Alright, the use of the Workforce Investment Act State Reserve and other funding source of the in Alaska classified registered apprenticeship programs are typically funded through the multiple sources. For example, transportation in Alaska is an issue. The unions have sponsored some of the classes which they pay for the cost of related instruction, which state picks up the cost of the transportation, lodging, training, and such for the commercial driver's licenses and welding package. Customized training and funded with the state training with employment training and funding. The UI Division Workforce Investment Eligibility Participation Co-enrolled Workforce Investment funds can be used and support eligible for participation in customized training. However, the typically fewer participation Workforce Investment Act eligibility. In the last class of the 16, there were only 3 workforce eligible Act eligible participations who also came with remote rural areas. Participation remained enrolled in the training until the site placement, in which the time Workforce Investment Act takes placement of the credit. With Workforce Investment Act eligibility does not last beyond the first year because the participation earnings becomes too great to qualify. Alaska has used the Workforce Investment Act incumbent worker fund to support the slots of the non-union pharmacy technical apprenticeship the safe way. Additionally, the state has used the other non-Workforce Investment Act funds to support the driver license training program, which is a prerequisite registered apprenticeship partnership. RB, South Carolina. Utilization of the eligible training provider list in the individual training accounts. South Carolina Department of Employment, the Workforce Acknowledgement, the funding with registered apprenticeship and the individual training accounts may not be mechanism due to the constraint of the eligible training provider list. The process of the workforce investment. For example, the difficulties of small business on the eligible training provider list does not have the fee-based tuition structure of the training outcome, the retention information. Furthermore, the registered apprenticeship agency are small 5 to 8 participants, and except for the few individuals' time in the intervals of the 4 to 5 years in between in such program, would it be placed in eligible training provider list and would be unavailable the most part of the stop center for the clients looking for active opportunity in the eligible training provider list. Local Workforce Investment Board states have struggled to find the best way to support the registered apprenticeship aid and individual training account funding. For the most part, the local areas are not managed to work with the Workforce Investment Act funding constraints for the service priorities. However, because of the strong belief of the viability of registered apprenticeship training model, the South Carolina strong support for the governor and state chamber of commerce utilize state general funds and Workforce Investment Act state set aside funds to promote apprenticeship as described above. The use of the Workforce Investment Act, state reserve, and other funding sources. In May 2002, the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce issued a white paper entitled "Apprenticeship and Employment of the Avenue with Building the Skilled Workforce in the South Carolina." The paper focused on the apprenticeship of the training with the utilized potential workforce-based learning opportunity with increasing the skills of the South Carolina workforce. As a result of the white paper, the South Carolina formed the Registered Apprenticeship Task Force in 2005 and 2006. The task force advocated the state funding of the South Carolina Technical College system and support the registered apprenticeship apprenticeship. In 2007, $1 million of recurring funding was allocated. The South Carolina Technical College system developed the apprenticeship of South Carolina. Director of the 4 regional representatives were hired initially to educate and assist the South Carolina business interests with developing registered apprenticeship opportunities. In conjunction with the South Carolina Technical College Skills System, the Apprenticeship College South Carolina established the tax credit with the program or programs to promote the registered apprenticeship. The eligible business can receive the tax credit of $1,000 for each of the registered apprenticeship for the employee of the last 7 months during each of the year of the apprenticeship program. The employer can claim the credit for up to 4 or up to 4 years in addition to the tax credit. Some of the costs of the CAG associated with the program, including instruction, training, wages, must be covered in the apprenticeship will meet the Workforce Investment Act eligibility requirements. In 2007, the South Carolina State Workforce Investment Board further underscored the establishment of the registered apprenticeship as a priority, offering $1 million for the state of the Workforce Investment Act reserve funds to go out with competitive parts for the general support of the registered apprenticeship. Training had to be high wage, high growth occupations. In 2009, additional $500,000 Workforce Investment Act reserve funds were added to the competitive grant additional program 2 year 2007 in order for the local workforce area the eligible Workforce Investment Act incentive money with each of the workforce and local Workforce Investment Board developed planning of the registered apprenticeship and additional meetings performance goal for the order to receive incentive of the following of the program year local years and demonstrated 14% of the increase of the registered apprenticeship program. As a result, the program year 2007 the apprenticeship Carolina reported up to 30% increase of the registered apprenticeship program, 25% increase of the number of apprenticeships between June 2007 and August 2011. The number of the registered apprenticeship agency registered apprenticeship programs grew from 900 to 293. The number of the apprenticeships grew from 777 to 3,168. Kansas, the utilization of eligible training provider list individual training accounts. South Central Kansas Workforce Investment Board, also known as the Workforce Alliance, have reviewed the eligible training provider list process, administrative procedure. Certified registered apprenticeship programs are not required to vet it again in order to be placed in the eligible training provider list. Registered apprenticeship agency program sponsors as placing the eligible training provider list by request overview of the committee of approval. The automatic registered apprenticeship programs are not required to submit the placement of the information. The Workforce Investment individual training accounts funds with providers supporting services such as workloads and other items needed for the program participation, along with the individual remaining eligible to workforce investment. These costs must normally be responsibility of the apprenticeship required for everyone to pay. The displacement of federal funds is not allowed. Whether the state workforce investment data system require receive the wages for apprenticeship placement over the credit with the taken for the individual. This is automated system credited placement with the wages reported with the responsibility for the program year 2009 Workforce Alliance to serve 29 individuals in registered apprenticeship. To the date, South Central Kansas Workforce Investment Board has not used the Workforce Investment Account Act funds to pay apprenticeship-related instruction. However, the board indicated that nothing would preclude the provide the need was identified. The participation must comply with the core of services of the one-stop center, which includes activities such as eligibility determination assessment. Eligibility, the Workforce Investment Act typically extends only to the unit with the first paycheck that have been received. Sometimes mutually eligibility determination made with the registered apprenticeship programs. In other cases, the eligible referrals are made to the registered apprenticeship program one-stop based on the identified interests of the Workforce Investment Act support participation. Our support of registered apprenticeship program infrastructure. The South Central Kansas Workforce Investment Function, known both as a local board and serve the provider for one-stop business, serve with the teamwork with registered apprenticeship, as much just as work as within other employer. The registered apprenticeship staff is located with the same the cabinet level of the NC Workforce Investment Act. The staff of the state registered apprenticeship directors supporting the having of the staff state regional registered agency staff housed with a one-stop center with the state of Kansas with the provider with the Workforce Investment Act reserve funds to support the state registered apprenticeship act. Registered apprenticeship staff. One-stop center offers all the job seeker the full range of opportunities, including the registered apprenticeship support through the recruitment application for the issuance of the one-stop to keep the information for the file with them about RA programs, including the procedure of the application and other informational material, all integrated with the center of the staff had been trained with the state with the apprenticeship staff, provided with the full range of information of the sponsored programs. The individual coming on one-stop. One-stop centers also maintain a list of the registered apprenticeship sponsors at the start of the day of the next training cycle. There is no long period of time between start date of the program and the day of the individual making the application for the assisting participation in individual services such as the barrier resolution, academic remediation, and stopping the gap of the employment while they were waiting for the program acceptance for the enrollment. Use the Workforce Investment Act, state reserves, and other funding resources in South Central Kansas to cover the union with the strongly did press economic community college reducing support relating and instructing the registered apprenticeship. The state provided $50,000 of the state Workforce Investment Reserves Fund for registered apprenticeship. And this year, with the offset with the cost is noted that the state also provides Workforce Investment Act reserve funds to support the state registered apprenticeship agency staff. Alright, 6. Measurement and performance. One of the reasons given for the workforce investment system that has been founded by the registered apprenticeship for the lack of the knowledge regarding how critical the performance of the CAP of the registered apprenticeship program information system for the account of the award of the Workforce Investment Act performance goals. The section provided with the further guidance of the workforce system on how to track the measured registered apprenticeship participation and capitalization opportunity to utilize registered apprenticeship to enhance the performance of the employment training agency, audit common measurement, adult common measure of the measurement that include the employment retention, average earnings of the data of the adult enrolled workforce program. A. Registered apprenticeship employment training. The registered apprenticeship participation employed with the sponsor while at the same time enrolled for the educational class referred to the related instruction, sometimes called the confusion on the part of the local workforce investment boards regarding how the participation against the countermeasure Workforce Investment Act. Wagner Pacer's clients were received the core intensive service as a result in their entry into the registered apprenticeship program, becoming employed with the registered agency sponsor for the participation can be tracked the other measures related to employment retention, average earning with the apprenticeship will receive the Workforce Investment Act service after employment enrollment of the workforce registered apprenticeship employed, but should be treated as incompetent workers. In this case, the retention earnings outcome should be tracked by the local workforce investment board to not be taken in place for the credit. B. Identifying the point of exit. The purpose of tracking the common measure for this is important to identify the point of exit of each for the participation. And note with the training and employment guidelines, which is 0207, Workforce Investment Wagner Passer clients associated with the registered apprenticeship program should be assigned with the system after the completion of the Workforce Investment Wagner and Pacer associated activity with the registered agency. Participation does not be tracked with the completion of the registered apprenticeship program unless they are supported with the workforce system resource throughout the period. An apprenticeship that will receive with the workforce system resource with the support specific portions of the classroom training should be excited with the workforce program, and upon completion Workforce Investment Act training and the service and provided within his or he or she continue the registered apprenticeship program a longer period of time. Alright, see the two basic scenarios for the capturing registered apprenticeship of the performance and adult common measures. There are two basic scenarios for the capturing of the registered apprenticeship performance of the adult and common measure of the participation. Either one, not an apprenticeship of the program, but then receiving the services. Two, the apprenticeship of the receiver the service for further progress. The following scenarios are adult entered employment rate and the adult employment retention rate and adult average earnings. Adult entered employment rate. The common measure included with the adult not employed in the time participation policies outcome that occurs in individual employed with the first quarter as he or she exists. 1. Why workforce investment Wagner Pacer participation are not employed to receive the services resulting in entry into the work registered apprenticeship participating treaty without the participation were not employed at the time of participation workforce investment Wagner Pacer. For example, the base and safe percent area number 1 individual not employed at the time of the participation received the Workforce Investment Act and or Wagner Pacer fund services subsequent to enter the registered apprenticeship program when he or she exits the Workforce Investment Act and Wagner Pacer fund services along individual remaining the registered apprenticeship act in the first of the quarter of the after the exit is considered employment and other words, the individual excited at any time of the April 1st, 2011, and June 30th, 2011, the second calendar quarter, as long as he or she is employed between July and September 2011, which the first quarter after each exit, the positive outcome in employment. 2. Registered apprenticeship with the Workforce Investment Wagner Pastor Advocacy with the support of the progress of the Registered Agent Program. The participation were employed. Time participation, Workforce Investment Wagner Pastor and Pacer, and are therefore considered incumbent workers. An example, the basis scenario 2, the individual earned with the Registered Apprenticeship Program, the Workforce Investment Act, Wagner Pastor. Participation becomes over the individual is employed with the participation in apprenticeship employment. He or she is not included in the considered employment rate. There is an individual with considered incumbent worker, but the incumbent workers are not included in the entered employment rate calculation because they measure only include the individuals not employed in the time of participation. Added adult employment retention rate. The common measure included the adults that were employed with the first quarter after their exit, regardless of whether they are employed. The participation positive outcome occurred with the individual is employed. Both the second and third quarters after exit employment does not have to be the same employer, but nor must be the specific period of time. Example-based scenario 1, the individual was not employed with the time of the participation workforce investment Wagner Passer with the subsequent enrolled with the Registered Apprenticeship Program. He or she works at the Workforce Investment Wagner Passer and was employed with as an apprenticeship with the first quarter for the exit after exit, where because the individual employed with the first quarter for the after exit, he or she will include the measure if an individual employed with the second and third quarters after the exit with the positive outcome of the retention out the works of the individual exited any time between the April 1st and June 2011 was subsequently employed any time in July 2011 to September 2011. He or she included with the retention measure as long as the individual employed within an apprenticeship at any time of the October to December 2011. He or she is employed within the apprenticeship at any time of the January to March 2012 is a positive outcome of the retention. Example-based scenario. The individual was already enrolled in the Registered Apprenticeship Program. He or she began receipt with the Workforce Investment Act with the Wagner Pacer Fund for the services he or she waived from Workforce Investment Act Wagner Pacer services. Although the individual employed with the first quarter after exits, he or she is not included in the intern employment measure because he or she is employed in participation. However, because the individual was employed in the first quarter after exit, he or she will include in the retention matter. In other words, if this individual exited any time of the act between April 1st and 2011 and June 2011 was employed anytime between July and September 2011 when the program was be held accountable to retention based on the employment any time during the October and December 2011 and January through March 2012. Alright, adult average learnings. Every common measure look with the average gross learning with all the individuals employed with the first, second, third quarters after exists. Individuals having the learning with the second, third quarters after exit include the calculation of the measure with the looks at the average gross learning over the 6-month period. Example, so along with the individuals employed with the first, second, and third quarter of the after exit, he or she has included average earning. One of the common measure for the assume that the 5 individuals were employed for the first and second and third quarters after exit combined with they have 75,000 gross earnings in the second and third quarter after exit. The average earnings are determined to follow the 75,000-5 divided by 5, resulting in average earnings of $15,000. Average earnings of the particular exiters for the employee with the first and second, third quarters after exit $15,000. Recommendations. Efforts within corporate, the registered apprenticeship through the workforce investment system have not yet been fully produced for the intended result of the public workforce system. See with the registered apprenticeship value partner as an integral part of the workforce development strategy. While challenges to bear with the collaboration exist, while the registered apprenticeship does not mandate the Workforce Investment Act, partner with the progress that has been made. Discussed earlier in the paper, several of the state and local areas have found creative ways to work with the existing system of support of the registered apprenticeship. As important talent development strategy, the following recommendation was simplificating the expanding with the model to encourage the greater collaboration alignment. Secretary of Labor and Secretary of Employment Training and Administrator should be used for the position to communicate the value of registered apprenticeship through the important collaboration workforce system in the area of the funding with the cause of the workforce program, career education, important with the system, partner leverage all possible workforce resources strategies include registered apprenticeship. 2. Workforce investment authorized registered apprenticeship to be given the special status regarding the employer training provider list process so that the sponsor who already vetted through the Federal Office of Apprenticeship and the State Apprenticeship Agency do not have to go through multiple evaluation local workforce investment boards. There should be better alignment performance being measured with the registered apprenticeship workforce system and curve. The workforce system utilized promote the registered apprenticeship model. The workforce system would be able to capitalize with the registered apprentice strategy and enhance the performance outcome. 4. The additional guidance of the workforce system on how it can effectively partner with the registered apprenticeship with this need, but this need is a policy implementing level of reinforcement must continue to show how to support. With a specific example, the registered apprenticeship within workforce investment and Wagner Pacer programs can work together to better the job seeker with the employer. Models should be provided with so they show how collaborative efforts can be funded with the performance credit under the common measures on the public policy level. The take of the form of the technical training employment guidelines with the training employment guidelines number 2207 provides for the state and local workforce investment boards one stop concerned with the development of the partnership. It should take form of the concise, easy to read brief. The video is focused on a singular topic provided with the step guidance for the replication or other implementation level of the current collaborative success. The partnership with the registered apprenticeship. The efforts need to continue with strong mutual education between the registered apprenticeship and the workforce system. The special focus should be the local workforce investment board, one-stop career center of which they seem to be more problematic. 5. Include registered apprenticeship in the employment training agency administration and grant activities. Grant funds should also be made available to employ and promote general goal and better collaborating between the registered apprenticeship and the workforce system. Attachment B. Quick reference guide, registered apprenticeship performance measure. One of the reasons given for the workforce investment not referring to supporting the registered apprenticeship program, lack of the registered, not regarding with how the credit performance of the captured registered apprenticeship programs has counted toward the Workforce Investment Act, employment services, and program performance goals. These are attachments provide quick reference to give a guide on how to reach, track, and measure for the registered apprenticeship participation, capitalization, operation, opportunity to utilize apprenticeship strategies, augmenting performance for the common measures. A referral of the Workforce Investment Employment Services and Participation Registered Apprenticeship Program. The Workforce Investment Employment Services and Participation are not employed for the time participation. They receive the referral resulting in the entry of the Registered Apprenticeship Program in order to be counted with the common measure. Registered apprenticeships are as an easy earn as you learn on the job training approach. The resulting participation to be counted as employed for the purpose of the entered employment rate of the enrollment of the apprenticeship result in the positive employment outcome of the time extent. So if they be covered the apprenticeship the average of 4 years length with the positive impact of the employment retention rate normally calculated within 18 months of the exit, although the apprenticeship can earn may more upon completion of the progressive wave. The schedule does not have positive impact with the average earning calculations because the apprenticeship tend to be higher earning low skilled occupations. Since all the registered apprenticeship participation employed with the waiver records can be used with the calculate the common measure result, there is no need for additional cumbersome data tracking. Example, adult participation not employed with the time participation received the workforce investment fund. The fund services the subsequent referred to the participation required registered apprenticeship program. When the participant exits the workforce investment fund services, there should be counted as they employed in the entered employment rate as long as their participation remains and apprenticeship is employed. 2. Registered apprenticeship program participation received the Workforce Investment Fund support. Apprenticeship received the Workforce Investment Fund services to support the participation registered apprenticeship program considered with employed in the time participation. These participation considered incumbent workers for the purpose of the common measure calculation, excluded with the inter-employment rate and included with employment retention. Average and earning calculation is stated with the registered apprenticeship partnership that positive impact on the calculation. Incumbent workers intended for the training services authorized statewide activity. The Workforce Investment Act of the Statute 134. A3A41, utilizing funds drawn with the state reserve of all adult youth dislocated worker funds, regarded with the applicability incumbent worker project with the statewide activity employment training agency with the previously stated with these individuals do not necessarily have to meet the eligibility criteria for the dislocated worker contained in Statute 1019 of the Act, nor do they have to meet the criteria employed to adult dislocated workers of Statute 134 D4A. Workforce and investment provided for the state reserve dollars may be used for the implementation and innovating with the incompetent worker training programs. Workforce investment power empowered to define the term incumbent workers for these projects. The definition incumbent workers may be included with employed workers, including the newly hired apprenticeship. Example, the individuals enrolled with the registered apprenticeship program subsequently receive the Workforce Investment Fund support services considered employed at the time of the participation involved in the employment rate calculation. However, the individual is to be included employment retention rate in their average earnings calculations. Alright, this is what I did. I had cut the this is originally training employment notice number 441, date May 10, 2012, encouraging enhanced partnership collaboration with the Workforce Investment Registered Apprenticeship Program. I skipped the training and notice and went to the Registered Apprenticeship Recommendation Facility Greater Collaboration Workforce Investment System or White Paper.